Hello my dear friends, you're in the Military Summary channel, and this video we're going to discuss the most important events that took place during the previous 12 hours. We have lots of very interesting updates, so let's start. And this morning on the 12th of March of 2025, the most important and the most interesting updates are coming from Kursk Oblast. According to information we have, this morning on the 12th of March of 2025, the armed forces of Russian Federation managed to establish complete control over the city by the name of Sudzha. We need to understand the difference between the city of Sudzha itself and Sudzha agglomeration. When talking about the city of Sudzha, this is the territory in the central part of Sudzha agglomeration. So this is exactly the city of Sudzha. We can compare the maps between the dates. For example, this is the situation by the beginning of the 12th of March, and this is the situation by the end of the 11th of March. So as you can see, the progress of the armed force of Russian Federation is significant. Once again, the city of Sudzha has fallen, but when talking about the Sudzha agglomeration itself, there are still 3 towns left. This is the settlement of Zaleshenka, which is located in the northern and the northwestern part of the Sudzha agglomeration. We're talking about the small town Goncharovka, which is located in the western and the southwestern part of the Sudzha agglomeration, and we're talking about small village of Podol, which is located in the southern part of the agglomeration. So summarizing everything and telling the truth, we have some doubts whether there are still Ukrainians in the town of Podol, and we believe that probably this settlement was also captured by the Russians by the morning of the 12th of March of 2025, but we still haven't received anything that can confirm this. Anyway, if the Russians haven't taken under control this settlement by now, obviously they would be able to do this by the sunset of the 12th of March of 2025. Furthermore, according to information we have, according to different reliable pro-Russian resources, as a result of offensive operation, the Russians also managed to answer the Sudzha agglomeration from the northern part by attacking the Ukrainian positions from the settlement of Kazachia Loknya. So these territories were also captured by the Russians, and we believe that due to complete absence of any barriers and any constructions that can slow down the Russians, we believe that this will lead to complete collapse of the settlement of Zaleshenka also during the next day, or during these let's say the next 12 hours until the sunset. The settlement of Zaleshenka would be taken by the Russians as well, and we believe that Ukrainians will be able to hold for several hours their positions in the territory of Goncharenka, because this village is let's say cut from the main Sudzha agglomeration with rivers, which are the something like natural barriers that will be able to slow down the Russians. Now, we are not saying that the Russians are not able to take the settlement of Goncharenka. We are saying that this is going to be most likely the last settlement that would be taken by the Russians when talking about Sudzha agglomeration. Now let's discuss details and let's discuss geolocation. Starting this morning, we began receiving lots of geolocations and lots of videos from the Soviet square. So there were published 3 videos were published since the beginning of the morning. In this video we can see the Russian soldier that was raising the Russian flag, probably the most highest construction in the central part of the Sudzha agglomeration. We see how happy the Russians were when they were doing this. Later we got another video from the Soviet square itself. Here we can see 7 soldiers. As you can see, the Russians are not afraid of anything, which means that most likely Ukrainian FPV drones and Ukrainian forces were much further in the western direction, maybe already along the border with the Russian Federation. And this is another video published by the Russians in the early morning of the 12th of March of 2025, and most likely this is the video with the first Russian flag that was established by the Russians in the vicinity of the town hall. Anyway, we believe that during the next 6 hours, the Russians will raise their first flags in the western and the southwestern and northwestern parts of Sudzha agglomeration, and the battle for this territory will be over. And there are going to be just several more villages under complete Ukrainian control. We are talking about small village of Aleshnya, small village of Milovoy, maybe Kurilovka, and the small settlement by the name of Guyeva and Garnal. So these are the small villages that are located along the border, and according to information we have, the Ukrainians are planning to hold them as long as possible. They will try to hold this buffer, and the forces of the 61st Brigade of the Armored Forces of Ukraine are responsible for this mission. But we are not sure that Ukrainians will be able to do this. According to different sources, during the retreat process and during the withdrawing positions, the Ukrainians lost up to 70% of soldiers in Sudzha agglomeration, which means that Ukrainians will get completely disorganized, exhausted, and very tired forces that most likely will not be able to continue defense operation. Now, of course, there are a lot of talks and lots of rumors whether the Russians are going to continue their offensive operation deep inside the territory of Sumy or not. You know that currently the negotiation process in Saudi Arabia ended between the delegation of the United States of America and delegation of Ukraine, and as a result of this negotiation process, we got several important statements made by the Ukrainian side. According to information we have, Ukraine expressed its readiness to accept the US proposal to immediately introduce a temporary 30-day ceasefire which can be extended by mutual agreement of the parties. Another important thing that the US immediately lifts the pause in intelligence sharing and restores military aid to Ukraine. And the most important, the presidents of the US and Ukraine agreed to conclude a comprehensive agreement on the development of Ukraine's critical mineral resources as soon as possible. So as you can see, 2 days ago the Ukrainians were asking and were demanding just to cease fire certain types of fight, like in air, in the sky, and in the sea, and attacks on energy facilities. But when the Ukrainians were completely defeated by the Russians in the city of Sudzha and in Sudzha direction, the Ukrainians accepted also a ceasefire along the line of combat contact, which means that if the Russians accept this 30-day ceasefire, this will play completely in Ukraine's favor. Today, a lot of pro-Russian military experts reported that when talking about this ceasefire, there is nothing that can give the Russians any benefits. When talking about this ceasefire, to conclude this ceasefire by the Russian side will bring just problems and losses to the Russians, because during this period of time, the Ukrainians will be able to restore their forces, to regroup their units, and to continue their defense operation, because almost every single military and political expert believes that most likely within 30 days this ceasefire would be broken either by the Russians or by Ukrainians, and the special military operation will continue. The question is, why do Putin need to sign this cease agreement and to accept this? You know that according to information we have today, or not today, by Friday, Putin's conversation with Trump will take place on Friday, and it will be more than just a phone call. This was reported by Kremlin pool journalist Dmitry Smirnov. Trump previously said that he would speak with Putin this week. Another important statement was made by Trump. Trump believes that Putin's agreement to a ceasefire, which the US president is counting on, will mark 75% of the way to resolving the Ukrainian conflict. Russia does not rule out contacts with US representatives in the coming days. The European Union supports the proposal for a ceasefire in Ukraine, said the head of the European Commission, Ursula von der Leyen. But today we still, since the beginning of all these talks and negotiation processes, since the beginning of the Sudzha offensive operation, we still haven't received anything from Putin. He still hasn't commented the situation. He still hasn't given us any statements or his opinion about the situation. But today we got the first signal from Moscow. Lavrov, the Minister of the Foreign Affairs, stated and gave his own position on the ceasefire without resolving the casualties of the conflict. What is important to us is not a ceasefire that will allow Ukraine to arm itself again and again against our country, but a long-term sustainable peace based on the eliminating the root causes of the conflict. And according to the Russians, the root causes of the conflict and the joining of the NATO, the European contingent on the territory of Ukraine, anti-Russian authorities in Kiev, and probably many other things like attitude towards the Russian language and many other things. So lots of experts are saying that the Russians will refuse this ceasefire, but telling the truth, and we believe that currently Putin is thinking. He is thinking what to do next, because this is very important and very interesting game between the United States of America, Russia and Ukraine. For example, today Marco Rubio stated after the end of the talks between Ukraine and the United States of America, he said that ball is now in Russia's court on Ukraine peace. So which means that if Russia refuses this agreement, if Russia will not accept this ceasefire, then the United States of America will sanction Russia even more, and the United States of America will try to do everything they can to probably destroy Russian economy. But the Russians currently, and Putin himself, are trying to find a solution how to continue probably this war until Europe, Ukraine, and the United States of America accept Russian demands and Russian proposal. And currently it's very difficult to understand how exactly the Russians are going to do this, because there are just 2-3 days left before talks between Putin and Trump, and by this time Putin must make his own decision. But telling the truth, the Russians start their investigation process in the city of Sudzha. If you remember, we've been talking a lot about war crimes committed by the Ukrainians on the territory of Sudzha region, and maybe you have already seen, maybe not, but if you try to Google it, or if you try to search or investigate, you will find already significant number of videos and data published by the Russian side regarding war crimes committed by the Ukrainians. And this morning, on the 12th of March of 2025, we start receiving the first videos that came from the city of Sudzha, and those territories that were recaptured by the Russians or liberated by the Russians since 8th of March of 2025. A lot of casualties among civilians, a lot of casualties among old people, tortures, and many other things. And we believe that during the next several days, the Russians will collect as much as possible information of this type, and most likely the Russians are going to use all these war crimes committed by the Ukrainians as a reason not to establish any ceasefire, and the Russians will provide all evidences to the United States of America, and obviously then the ball will be in Ukrainian corner. So we believe that something like this is going to happen during the next several days. At least by this, the Russians will try to win some time. Now let's move further. During the previous night, despite the negotiation process in Saudi Arabia, despite all these things, the Russians continue bombing and attacking the territory of Ukraine with a significant number of missiles and drones. During the previous night, several explosions were recorded on the territory of Dnipro. First, the Russians attacked Ukraine positions with drone, then several Iskander missiles attacked the territory of city, and according to information we have, a hotel was destroyed as a result of Russian fire, where most likely the Western volunteers or Western instructors were located. Now let's discuss the situation on the ground on other front lines, and probably the most interesting updates are coming from the South Donetsk direction, where the Ukrainians continue their attempts to counterattacks, and according to information we have, the Ukrainians managed to restore control over 50% of the settlement of Novosilka. Today this information was confirmed by neutral mappers, and the Ukrainians managed to restore their positions between the settlement of Burlatskaya and the settlement of Privilya. Once again, this information was provided us by pro-Ukrainian and neutral mappers without any confirmation. From the other side, the Russians, very reliable Russian sources, reported that as a result of offensive operation, the Russians today by the morning of the 12th of March managed to establish complete control over the settlement by the name of Dnipro. So these are the changes on the ground between the dates. So this is the situation by the end of the 11th of March. This is the situation by the beginning of the 12th of March. So we see that despite the negotiation process, both sides continue their offensive operation. But anyway, one thing we can tell for sure, that now the Ukrainians, it's going to be much more easier for Ukrainians to continue fighting with the Russians, because United States has lifted the pause on intelligence sharing and will resume security assistance to Ukraine. That was stated by State Department, which means that the weapon will continue its flow, and now the Western countries continue arming Ukraine to fight with the Russians. And that's it for this video. Military Summary channel reminds we condemn any violence in the world. Thank you for watching. Subscribe to my channel, put your likes, join my Patreon, and have a good day. Bye bye.